Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to a new episode of Living the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez. We're in trying times as a church, as you may have heard in my last show. I apologize for some of the sound difficulties. I understand that 20 minutes of the show did not somehow get transmitted, and there was an echo throughout the show, and I apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused. This show is recorded, so until we work out the bugs in our live show, I'll be doing a recorded show, and you're fortunate to have me as your one and only host today. But I'm talking on a subject that gets me very excited. It's crisis pregnancy centers. When the world is turning around us in what seems to be a very bad direction against life and the family, we can despair, or we can pray and fast for the church, and we can double down on our charitable efforts to bring the gospel of life to those around us. And that's what I choose to do. I'm not cursed to darkness. I'm lighting a candle. But I would always remind you that the warning that I heard recently from Cardinal Carafa, who died a year ago, he wrote a letter to Sister Lucia of Fatima, the third seer of Fatima, who died a few years ago. And he didn't expect a response, but he got a response that really blew him away, as they say. He got a warning from her that the final battleground between God and Satan would be over marriage and the family, and that those of us who would support traditional Catholic marriage and the family, it's not just Catholic marriage, it's marriage as has been understood since the Pentateuch, since the Ten Commandments, that one man and one woman should be married before God, and they should remain married for the rest of their lives. Jesus taught this very clearly. In fact, he had many people confronting him, saying this was impossible. Well, the same thing with the Church's teaching, Humanae Vitae, and against artificial birth control and towards openness to new life. We've been told this is impossible. We've been told to get with the times. The Catholic Church is holding firm on these things, although there is obviously division within the Church. And those of us who hold fast to the Catholic magisterium, the teaching of the Catholic magisterium, sometimes feel besieged, and it's not paranoia, we are. So let's just start this session with a prayer. As always, our hope is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth, and we will call upon God's Mother to bless this session and to bless our efforts to change the world for our Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that we who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time, obtain from the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely in order to build together with people of goodwill a civilization of truth and love to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and Lover of life. Amen. I remind you that the author of the Gospel of Life, Evangelium Vitae, is St. Pope John Paul II, who lived in some of the worst times of the 20th century. It has been said that the 20th century had more martyrs than the previous 19 centuries before it, and I certainly believe it. Between various dictatorships like the Nazis and Mussolini and the Spanish Civil War and then the communist regime that followed it, all over the world, there were tens of millions killed, particularly Christians, for their faith. This continues, unfortunately, in the 21st century. Right now, there's a wholesale slaughter of Christians across the world, especially right now I'm thinking of Nigeria, where Boko Haram is killing Nigerian Catholics and Christians in record numbers. And Syrians are suffering and dying for their faith as well. Throughout the Middle East, Christians are persecuted, and certainly in China, where the brutal regime is closing down churches. There There's also injustice against Christians in Pakistan, as you see Asa Bibi, a Catholic woman who was randomly picked for imprisonment, has been in prison for years. Various Protestant pastors and priests and nuns are also in jail for their faith. So we keep all of these in mind in our prayers, but do not lose hope, because our Lord, as you know, wins in the end, and we have that hope. So today I'm going to talk to you about a particularly hopeful sign, and this is crisis pregnancy centers, as they used to be called, or we now call them pregnancy resource centers. And I've got very solid reasons for my optimism. I have statistics, okay? You can be optimistic in the Lord when all seems lost, but you can also be optimistic when you look at statistics that pregnancy resource centers are part of the reason that there are half as many abortions now as there were in the 1980s. Okay, we are really winning the battle for hearts and minds, and for lives, of course, and souls. As Catholics, we understand that souls are lost in abortion too. But we believe that the baby soul goes to heaven because the baby is innocent, but the mother may lose her soul to hell for all eternity if she doesn't realize the gravity of what she's done and repent. So we pray for those mothers. Let's hear what St. John Paul II had to say in chapter 87 of Evangelium Vitae regarding pregnancy resource centers. He doesn't call them that, but he names pregnancy resource centers and maternity homes in one paragraph. He says, many are the means towards which this end, which need to be developed with skill and serious commitment, that is, meeting the needs of those who are in crisis pregnancy centers. In the first stage of life, centers for natural methods of regarding fertility should be promoted as valuable help to responsible parenthood, in all which individuals, as in the first place, the child are recognized and respected in their own right, and where every decision is guided by the ideal of the sincere gift of self. Marriage and family counseling agencies, by the specific work of guidance and prevention, carried out in accordance with anthropology consistent with Christian vision of the person, of the couple, and sexuality, also offer valuable help in rediscovering the meaning of love and life, and in supporting and accompanying every family in its mission to the sanctuary of life. In its mission as the sanctuary of life. And now he gets specifically to what I do. Newborn life is also served by centers of assistance and homes or centers where new life receives a welcome. That's what pregnancy resource centers are, centers where new life receives a welcome. Thanks to the work of such centers, many unmarried mothers and couples in difficulty discover new hope and find assistance and support in overcoming hardship and the fear of accepting a newly conceived life or life which has just come into the world. A very important thing to say is that pregnancy resource centers are not new. They've been around since abortion, or since before abortion was legal in this country. And according to the pro-life OBG Center, there are many different organizations that support pregnancy resource centers. There's Heartbeat International, of which my former pregnancy center, St. Gerard's, was a member. The National Institute of Family Life Advocates, NIFLA, which just had a win in the Supreme Court against the Attorney General Becerra of California. The state of California had passed a law saying that every pregnancy resource center had to publish a large notice in, I believe it was 41-point font and 31 translations, which is basically wallpapering a wall with a notice in various languages saying that you can get a free abortion paid by California's version of Medicaid. And now this was to be posted in every single pregnancy resource center in California. Brave pregnancy resource centers flouted that unjust law, and it was brought all the way up the chain to the Supreme Court, where in last June it was announced that the decision had been made that free speech trumps the rights, and I want to say rights, or the interests of the abortion industry. Because let's not deceive ourselves, folks. They make millions, if not billions of dollars per year killing babies. And pregnancy resource centers don't make millions of dollars a year. They give away millions and billions of dollars a year in saving mothers from a terrible decision. They're saving the mother from a decision that most of them regret for the rest of their lives. It haunts their dreams. It causes terrible behavior, from self-harm to drug addiction to promiscuity to suicide. And many other mothers, it causes repeat abortions. They punish themselves with abortion after abortion, looking to find the peace that eluded them when they aborted their child in the first place. So pregnancy resource centers are invaluable to be the last stop for a woman who feels that she has no choice. There is something called Life International National and the option line. Okay, the option line is an important 800 number. You can reach them at 800-395-HELP. That is 800-395-HELP. If you're listening to me and you think you might be pregnant and you're frightened, you feel overwhelmed, you feel like you might be considering an abortion, or even if you don't think about abortion, but you still need help, we would be happy to refer you at this line to a pregnancy center in your area, 1-800-395-HELP. And then there's the Protestant CareNet group, which has a network of pregnancy centers with an evangelical point of view all over the United States. So these pro-life pregnancy centers are doing wonderful work in the world right now. In fact, according to APLOG, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, a great organization, I attended one of their conferences in D.C., and only half the people there were obstetricians. The other half were people like me running pregnancy centers, nursing students, medical students, people that wanted to help turn the culture for life. So this wonderful organization says that there are 2,300 pregnancy resource centers in North America. That includes Canada. But only 3% of the world's 46 million yearly induced abortions occur in North America. Only 600 such ministries exist in the rest of the world, where 97% of the induced abortions are done. So the United States apparently is way ahead on this. Way ahead on this trend, and it's a wonderful trend because it's a life-giving trend, as the Holy Father said. So that these centers started in 1971. In 1975, CareNet started as the Christian Action Council. All right. In 1993, NIFL was founded to provide legal advice and consultation to centers and was the leader in promoting medical and ultrasound education. They still do wonderful ultrasound training and let clinics that want to go into a medical model know how that is done. The medical model includes ultrasound, but it also includes such things as STD testing, pregnancy testing, etc., so that instead of the typical reaction when a woman, especially a single woman or a poor woman, is pregnant, she tends to go to Planned Parenthood as the default place to go for her pregnancy test. But she is inevitably referred to an abortion. I've never heard of anyone in Planned Parenthood not being referred for abortion. They say they counsel on options, but for them there's only one option. That they can go to a life-saving pregnancy center with all the same medical credentials, but that will give them a true choice. You know, they will have the choice of parenting the child or giving the child for adoption, and they will be counseled about all the needs to put their life back together. Do they need drug rehab assistance? Do they need to look for a job? Do they need to go back to school, finish their GED, or some kind of skill training like nurse assistant, medical assistant? Do they need an AA meeting? Do they need housing? And of course, we give abundant supplies of baby goods. At St. Gerard's, we gave baby supplies up to age 2, till the child was 2. The mother had to, after she had the baby, she received a layette in time for the baby's birth, and she did prenatal classes. But then once the baby was born, the mother received monthly classes as a group, all the moms, so they got to meet other moms parenting similar-age babies in the area, and they attended chastity classes, classes on nutrition, classes on mother's health, classes on STDs, classes on marriage, classes on how not to be sexually abused, classes on welfare resources, all different types of classes to help them put somewhat broken lives back together and to prepare for a life raising that child. Most of our mothers have chosen to, at least at St. Gerard's, chose to raise their child. Unfortunately, adoption has a bit of a bad reputation right now, which we're hoping to repair because adoption is a beautiful option. I know many wonderful moms and dads and adopted children that are so happy they found each other, and it's such a blessing. So I'd like to help rehab the image of adoption. Perhaps we'll do a show on that in the future. Heartbeat International originally was called Alternatives to Abortion, began in 1971. Note that's 2 years before Roe versus Wade, but abortion was legal. And Heartbeat is establishing centers in North America and internationally. So all these, in the mid-90s, focused on the family and evangelical Protestant organization, began providing educational resources. They have wonderful pamphlets. And later on pushed for the acquisition of ultrasound units. The pregnancy resource community understands that a mother seeing their baby in ultrasound is an extremely powerful way for her to realize that that is a living child with a heartbeat, that his independent body has an independent ability to move and to suck their thumb and to kick their legs, and increasingly to think and react to his or her environment. So over 80% of mothers who see an ultrasound of their child are able to choose life for their child despite whatever sacrifices it might require. And we've seen some really brave mothers facing some very intimidating circumstances in their lives. But that's the beauty of a pregnancy resource center. Our help for you doesn't end when you walk out the door with that sonogram on your phone. And yes, we do put the sonogram on the phone and a pack of diapers. Many of us help you for years later. And we have women come back time and time again knowing that although nobody else is happy, that they have a child happy, and that we rejoice with them. And in many cases, that's all these mothers require. It's just an arm around their shoulders and a hot cup of coffee in their hand and a big smile saying, we're happy that this baby is coming, and we will walk with you through all the storms that face you, and we'll support you through that. And that is just a priceless, in today's society where there's so much loneliness, that is a priceless gift to give to these pregnancy centers. So let me tell you a little bit about my story in crisis pregnancy centers, and then I will go to a little bit more statistics. I want to drown you in statistics. When I was a teenager, I learned about the pro-life movement, as I said, when I was 13 in the 7th grade religious ed class. It was all women, taught by women and women in the class, so we were informed about the tragedy of abortion. And of course, as typical young people, we were outraged and we wanted to get involved. So what does a 13-year-old do? Well, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of guidance back then. We were still feeling our way around. But what I did do is I joined a pro-life group in my parish, and I was able to go to the March for Life. What are the other very important things that even young people involved in pro-life or interested in pro-life can do is to help the local pregnancy resource center. And that's what I did. I found Birthright and I found Life Center. I lived in Long Island at the time. Life Center of Long Island has several different locations. I believe it's 5 at the time. I haven't lived in Long Island for 10 years, but they do amazing work. And I learned about what pregnancy resource centers are like from Life Center. I started by doing fundraising drives. I would go to a church and be the announcer for a baby bottle drive and stand at the door and give out baby bottles in both English and Spanish. As I got older and I was married myself, I would do counseling on the phone in Spanish for Spanish-speaking moms who were desperate and whose partners were pushing them in mission. Some of these women were even married. But because husbands were afraid, they had limited income, they may or may not have had legal status in this country, the women and men were feeling pressured to abort. So we were able to intervene then. So what can you do? You can donate money, you can help fundraising, and you can collect baby items. I never pass a baby item either on the curb or being sold for a decent price that I don't pick it up and bring it to a pregnancy resource center. Now, some of them have stopped giving away cribs because there's obvious issues of safety with cribs, but things like a baby seat or a stroller are usually pretty welcome, and definitely baby clothes in good condition, and diapers, and wipes for sure. And again, many pregnancy centers are stopping to take baby powder because there's been some health risks associated, especially with little girls using baby powder later in life. They're found to have ovarian cancer in some cases. So different pregnancy centers will have different requirements, and you have to expect that you show up at the door with a donation. It may or may not be something that they can use. But certainly money is always useful. A check, their prayer support, offering to answer the phone, so whatever else they want you to do is something that everybody can do. And with 2,300 pregnancy centers in North America, I'm pretty sure if you look it up online, you can find one within a decent amount of time for you. So that's what I was doing at Life Center. I took the training and I was doing counseling. I did baby bottle drives. My mother, God rest her soul, passed away 9 years ago, but in her last days, she was working at Life Center as the assistant to the director. Lorraine Garibaldi. Eleanor Craffle was her right-hand woman there, and she was helping with all the clerical issues, running 5 different pregnancy centers. So my family's been deeply involved, and of course I dragged my daughters into St. Gerard's. When I moved to Connecticut, I worked with Birthright in Willimantic, and I traveled for an hour to St. Gerard's for over 3 years to volunteer first as just a board member and then as a director for 2 years with St. Gerard's Center for Life in Hartford. We were in a convent at that time, and we had a center across the street for an abortion clinic, Hartford GYN. The only problem is that facility was very rickety. You had to go go across 5 busy lanes of traffic from the abortion clinic, up a steep set of stairs, and you were underneath a rap recording studio where there was a lot of noise and a lot of fragrance, if you know what I mean, coming down from that studio. So the former director had closed this less than optimal location. The only thing good about the location was the location, that it was across the street from the abortion clinic, and I was able to, with the help of the wonderful funds that prior people had raised at St. Gerard's, able to purchase a condo in the same condo complex as Hartford UIN. So we were literally 20 feet away from the door of the abortion clinic. The abortion clinic owned in a brownstone, which had been owned by the founder of Hartford Hospital. And we were in the carriage house, that is the stable. It had been upgraded quite a bit, but it was very interesting the Catholics are in the stable. So we were there, and we're still there now for over a year and a half, offering an alternative to the women walking in for abortion. And we some of our volunteers stand in the sidewalk offering cards with the words, "May I help you?" We offer the women a hot cup of coffee or a cold drink of water, whether or not they choose to come in with us. We offer the women a chance to talk about their situation and whatever help that we find available. These include crisis intervention, prenatal and postnatal guidance, material support, car seats, clothing, diapers. We do abstinence education. Once the baby has been born, we talk about the beauty of sexual integrity. We talk about fertility awareness and appreciation. Explain to the woman the beauty of how her body works and how to work with the body without using artificial means of birth control within a marital relationship. We do post-abortion counseling for women that have deep regrets about their abortion. Sometimes the women at St. George's would come in immediately after an abortion. I'll never forget one woman who had just aborted twins and was in shock. She was in pain, physical, emotional, spiritual, and she was in shock. I really don't think the gravity of what she had just done had occurred to her. And we surrounded her with love. We put our arms around her shoulders. We prayed with her. We asked God's forgiveness. And we let her cry. Gave her something to drink, as long as she needs to stay there, a cup of water, I believe it was, and we offered her Rachel's Vineyard. Rachel's Vineyard is an invaluable resource for women who have been through the trauma of abortion and are seeking to heal. One of our counselors was a Rachel's Vineyard counselor, and she does workshops up at the Shrine of Divine Mercy in Stockbridge. So I would highly recommend that anyone who has suffered the trauma of abortion look up rachelsvineyard.org, rachelsvineyard.org, and you will see there are wonderful retreats, weekend retreats that you can go on. There are groups, and there's also outreach to men, because men suffer from abortion too, not only by choosing abortion, but as you know, in this country, a woman can choose abortion without consulting with her partner or her spouse. And in fact, she doesn't even have to tell them. And in Connecticut particularly, a young woman can choose an abortion under 18 years of old without her parents knowing. In many schools, I'm a former teacher, and I saw this happen on Long Island as well. The teacher or social worker will take a young woman for an abortion during the school day, and she comes back on the school bus to her home without the parents any the wiser. So if this daughter collapses and starts hemorrhaging later at night, the parents are caught completely unaware. And if the girl is going into some self-destructive behavior afterwards because she regrets her abortion, again, the parents have no way of helping. So this is the reality in 17 states in the United States, that a young woman under the age of consent can go for an abortion. And the greatest tragedy of this is that in many cases, the man who has gotten this girl pregnant is over 18. And by definition, that means that she has been sexually abused. Many times she's been trafficked or certainly sexually abused by an older boyfriend. And that boyfriend, in most cases, is not turned in to the authorities by Planned Parenthood and other pro-abortion clinics, abortion clinics. There have been films by Lila Rose, and where this young woman has been counseled to change her boyfriend's age on the intake information with a wink by the counselor. The counselor thinks it's funny to hide the fact that this young woman under the age of 18 has been trafficked or has been abused, manipulated by an older man who is probably taking her for the abortion to cover up what he has done and to keep abusing this young girl. He has no interest in a baby. He's only interested in abusing this young woman. So this is very important. The post-abortion counseling is very important for the women, because 40% of women who have abortions repeat it and have second abortions. So it becomes a pattern of behavior. We had a young woman with 12 abortions in one of the pregnancy centers I worked with. She was compulsively aborting children, and she was in so much pain. They joked at the abortion clinic. They called her a frequent flyer. There's nothing funny about getting 12 abortions. Even people who believe that it needs to be a right certainly don't think that's a good idea. It's bad for her health, mentally and emotionally. It's certainly bad for her spiritually. Fortunately, in the pregnancy center I was working at there, we were able to bring her to confession. And we were able to bring her to drug and alcohol rehab. We were able to help her get to school, get into a parish, get into an AA program, and receive all kinds of help that she desperately needed. Did the abortion clinic refer her to any of these places? Certainly not. They just laughed and called her a frequent flyer, and she was their mascot because she was a frequent flyer. That's not funny. But the funny thing was, one day, she turned right instead of left. Instead of going to the abortion clinic, she went into a resource center when she was pregnant. And one of the staff at the abortion clinic saw her doing it, and her jaw dropped, because this was not her behavior before. And that's what we try to do at pregnancy resource centers. We help the woman think out of the box, do something she's never thought of before, make the right choice for her child. And we give her the support to do it. We don't just say, bring the child to birth and lots of luck. We carry her through the pregnancy, through the birth, and into the child's early years so that the mother is on a good standing with that child or has given that child up for adoption. Like I said, it's an option we always present. We're besieged by calls from beautifully young couples looking for children all the time, and it's very, very seldom that we get to match them up with a child. But we would like to offer that option more and more to women. So like I said, there's many types of assistance that different pregnancy centers offer. They link with community resources such as maternity housing, continuing education, employment opportunities. So we try, we can't do everything, but we try and find out where everything is done so that young woman does not feel that she's been abandoned emotionally and she doesn't feel economically stranded. And in Rod Murphy, our friend that we had earlier on the show, in his pregnancy center, Problem Pregnancy in Worcester, they have a policy of whatever it is that keeps this woman from having the baby, we will remove that obstacle no matter what it costs. And it can be very unusual. He has done some unusual things, as he mentioned, as paying for a wedding. They paid for a very simple wedding for a young couple that said, well, we can't have this baby because we're saving for a wedding. There was another couple, a married couple from Africa, that had a car payment. It was a rather nice car. But, to that couple, that car... So the pregnancy center made the car payment for a year so that baby could come first. And there the beautiful baby was born, and the parents were so grateful. And, the priorities got straightened out later. It's not always our goal to straighten everyone's priorities. We need to make sure the baby survives, and we need to find out later how we can help the parents say, in the next time they're pregnant, this baby comes first. Sometimes, the priority is a little bit skewed, but that is our world, isn't it? If you look around, and I must say that I'm a pet lover. I have 3 cats and a golden retriever, whom I adore. But you're seeing more and more pets and fewer babies. Western Europe, Japan, and the United States are in a demographic freefall among Caucasians. The only reason the United States population is not going down is because of heavy immigration. But in countries like Japan, and they're considering paying couples to have children. Even China, with a one-child policy for decades, has first they turned into a two-child policy, where they're limiting Chinese couples to 2. Now they've absolutely reversed that, and now they're actually looking to encourage couples to have children. Because what happened is, in a very male-centered world of China, most parents would abort girl babies in favor of boy babies. So you have 125 boys for every 100 girls in China, which creates a crisis when the young men grow up, and 25 out of 125 men cannot find a woman to marry. In fact, I've even heard of cases where Chinese couples would adopt a baby girl, raise the baby girl as their natural son's sister, so that he would have someone to marry. Very strange, okay? You would think that having a paucity of women would lead to an advantageous situation for women. But it just seems that abortion seems to always put women at a disadvantage. It looks like freedom at the outset, but like I was just reading a very interesting essay by Mary Eberstadt, who wrote for the book, Janet Smith's book, Humanae Vitae is Still Right. I totally recommend it. I'm just starting to read the book, but this first essay blew me away. She quoted a medical journal, believe it or not, talking about the sociological shifts caused by abortion. And what she said stunned me. Well, it's actually what these two medical researchers said, sociological researchers said, that once carrying a child to term or not, carrying a child to term or aborting the child became a choice, then it was never a choice before. It was always assumed you're pregnant, you carry to term. But once it became a choice with the advent of birth control and with abortion. Okay, don't forget the pill was legalized in 1960. Abortion was legalized completely in this country 13 years later, but it was legalized in several states before that. So the pill and abortion followed very closely on one another's heels. That the men all of a sudden had a choice that they never had before. They had a choice to abandon the woman, not marry her, and to force the woman to have an abortion, and to decide that they weren't going to pay child support by running out on them. This is something that has always happened in the United States, but it's an epidemic in this country now. Anyone who's worked in a pregnancy center or welfare agency knows that most of the women in the inner city have been abandoned by the father of their children. And that is now their choice, okay? The women can choose to kill the child, and the man can't stop her, but the man can choose to deny that it's his child, DNA test notwithstanding, and run out on her. And certainly we've seen it happen, even with married couples. As a young social worker in the mid-1980s, I saw a medical doctor that had a good lawyer, and his wife woke up one day. He had abandoned his family. He went off with the secretary, took every single credit card, every dollar out of the house. She lived in a beautiful house, but she couldn't afford to heat it. So she came to Catholic Charities looking for Christmas food, not gifts. She could afford the gifts because, surprisingly, she had a card from Bloomingdale's. But Bloomingdale's didn't offer anything in the way of food, really. So she needed Christmas dinner and breakfast for her children. She was living in their former living room because she could not afford to heat the whole house. She had bought some space heaters at Bloomingdale's and either beautiful down quilts, beautiful Christmas gifts, because that's all she had left. But she had no food. This married woman, mother of a doctor, a specialist, mind you, in a beautiful part of Long Island near the water, was completely abandoned by her husband because he had a better attorney, and he had planned everything before she had a chance to react. I don't know how long her situation was that desperate, but look at this. And somebody who later met me, he met me and gave me a tour of his hospital and said what great gifts he gave to charity. Now, at that time, I was bound by confidentiality. So all I was able to do to this terrible man was look him in the eye and say that charity begins at home. I might have been breaking confidentiality, but I don't think so. So this is a situation where men have been walking out on women because women are walking out on their babies. And it's a terrible situation, and one in which pregnancy resource centers have worked very hard to reverse. So let me talk about what pregnancy resource centers have actually done. And I don't say pregnancy resource centers exclusively, because within the past 5 years, the United States local legislatures in the states have passed between 200 and 300 measures to make abortion more rare. And when I say measures, I mean laws that restrict abortion in one way or another. Roe versus Wade originally legalized abortion throughout all 9 months. The Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision in 1992 mandated that states could regulate abortion and could limit abortion, thankfully. It didn't overturn Roe, which we had hoped, but it did say that states could pass limits. So in the past 5-10 years, almost 300 limits have been placed on abortion. What are the examples? Well, as I alluded to before, let's see, I guess it's 33 states have said that a minor seeking an abortion must at least inform her parents. In some states, she must get consent from her parents. In other states, she must at least inform her parents. Unfortunately, New York and Connecticut, where I've lived, are not two of those states. They tend to be more the center of the country, the South. The coast and the Northeast are very, very pro-abortion, very blue states, as everyone knows. So anything goes. So there's one example. Another example would be that a woman should see an ultrasound of her unborn child. I know about you, but I've been scheduled for surgery a few times in my life, and most times I go for a second opinion and decide it wasn't necessary. All right, abortion is the most commonly performed surgery in this country. Women should not go into any decision which could leave them crippled or dead or infertile without going for a second opinion. And that second opinion needs to involve the sonogram. I want to see what it is that I will be eliminating from my body. I want to know why, what that person, I need to know it's a person, first of all, and I need to be informed about that. I can clearly remember seeing a sonogram of my daughter at 4 weeks and seeing a heartbeat. 4 weeks. I understand you can see it sometimes even earlier than that. So that woman needs to know, be truly informed that that child has a heartbeat. You know, many people who have come from abortion clinics have said that they were told that that child is just a blob of tissues. That's a common excuse. Well, no blob of tissues has its own DNA and its own heartbeat. That's a human being. All right? That is, by definition, a human being biologically from the moment of conception, the moment the sperm meets the egg in the fallopian tubes, before the baby even has a chance to embed in the womb. The zygote has a chance to embed in the womb. That is still a genetically unrepeatable human being. Doesn't have a heartbeat yet, but from the moment of conception, that is a unique human being. And if you're a Christian or you believe that child has an eternal soul, an immortal soul, whether or not the other side chooses to believe that. And since most women in this country are Christian, they believe that in some way or shape or form and need to see clearly with their eyes that a child has been conceived in the womb, the child living in the womb. So there's a waiting period, 24-hour waiting period. There's a chance to see an ultrasound and pro-life information. There is informed consent. And all of these things are very important because they help a woman make a decision. And so that is a big part of why abortion statistics have gone down. But another important part are those 2,300 crisis pregnancy centers, okay? I remember, I'm so old, I remembered back in the time when we were trying to match the number of abortion clinics. We were trying to match the number of abortion clinics with crisis pregnancy centers. Now I believe there's 4 times or 5 times as many pregnancy centers as there are abortion clinics. So this is why some of the statistics I'm going to tell you have changed so drastically. Okay, this is from the Connecticut Catholic Conference 9th Annual Report of 2016 called A State of Abortion in Connecticut. All right, so here we go. The first and most important statistic, in my opinion, is that abortions performed in Connecticut between 2006 and 2015, that is a 9-year period, have gone drastically down. From 2006, 14,112 abortions, down to 2015, 9,938 abortions. That's down by a third. That's tremendous. That's like 5,000 less. Over 4,000, almost a third. 4,000 less babies being aborted, and that's just wonderful. And 4,000 fewer mothers having lifelong regrets in abortion. And also abortion for minors under 18 years of age has also gone down. In 2006, there were 1,147 abortions performed on minors. Imagine 1,100 young women going home from school with a secret that they were afraid to tell their parents, and so much pain that they couldn't share with their families. In 2015, that number went down to 360. So that's a clear 2/3 removed. In other words, the number of abortions in 2015 was 360. That's a third of 1,147, nearly a third of 147. Well, I'd say almost, a quarter to a third of the number of abortions that we had. 2/3 down number of abortions in minors. That's wonderful. That means minors are probably getting pregnant less often. There are statistics showing that they're getting sexually involved much less often than they did, and also that they're finding the resources to help them either approach their parents or help them to not abort, whether that means adopting or parenting. But they're finding what the strength they need to have their babies. So these is very important statistics. And also, unfortunately, because Connecticut was one of the more liberal states in New England, and some of our neighbors prohibited abortions of minors, we had a lot of minors coming to Connecticut from out of state for abortions. So not only was your child, your young daughter, leaving the school for an abortion, but she was leaving the state, and you as a parent had no way of finding out. In the year 2007, 111 minors came into Connecticut for abortions from either Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, or other states. That 111 was reduced to 31 in the year 2015. Again, 2/3 reduction, thank God. the number of out-of-state minors receiving abortions in Connecticut. I can't forget living on Long Island and having what I thought was a lovely Catholic couple living behind me. They were teachers in a public school in Manhattan. They drove all the way in. It was a good hour and a half ride, complaining that a father from the Dominican Republic showed up in the school with blood in his eyes, and he was screaming in Spanish, and he was very upset. And what had happened is these teachers had taken his daughter, his underage daughter, high school girl, out of knowledge. And coming from the Dominican Republic, where this was unthinkable, he was absolutely outraged, as he should be. He's a good father. He was absolutely outraged as his daughter was taken for surgery, and his grandchild was killed without his knowledge. And yet the teachers were shocked that he should be upset, because what they were doing was perfectly legal. I remember getting in a big fight at a baptism in Manhattan with a family member because she said, there is no way that's legal. That is outrageous. And I said, just because it's outrageous doesn't mean it's not legal. A lot of things that we are outraged as Catholics are legal, and that's why we have to be careful. Outrage is a good thing. We can channel it, we can use it, but not to lose hope. Things are turning around, and as I said, pregnancy resource centers are a big part of that. So here is where the young women come from out of state to get abortions in Connecticut. And this is between 2004 and 2015. 57 young women came from New York. 342 came from Rhode Island to Connecticut for abortions, and 442 came from Massachusetts for abortions in Connecticut because their states did not permit them to get abortions. Now, here's a very an interesting statistic, which is worrisome in some ways, because abortion is changing in the United States. It's going from mainly a surgical procedure to largely a drug procedure, as RU 486, which is the abortion pill. It's 2 pills, are taken to produce an abortion. The FDA has approved it now up to the end of the first trimester, which is 12 weeks. I had 3 miscarriages around 7-8 weeks, and baby is substantial, and you can see that it's a baby at 7 weeks. I can only imagine in 5 more weeks how much bigger that baby is. I would say about 2 inches long when that baby is delivered, amid tremendous cramps and bleeding and trauma of the mother. A 7-week miscarriage was traumatic that I didn't cause, but I can only imagine how traumatic a 12-week intentional miscarriage is for the mother who goes home with a packet of pills. So here's the statistics. In 2006, of 11,807 of abortions, 15 abortions, only 2,277, I want to say 20%, were medical. That is, they were pills. So the 12,000 abortions were, out of 14,000 abortions, 2,000 were the pill, and nearly 12,000 were, were surgical. So you had, I would say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1/8, 1/7 of abortions were done by the abortion pill. Okay, now as we come up to 2015, it's roughly half and half. We have 4,392 medical abortions in 2015 in Connecticut. That is abortions with the RU486 versus 5,500 surgical abortions. Again, a young woman can go into a Planned Parenthood or her doctor, hospital clinic, and get the abortion, walk out with nothing more than a little baggie in her hands. I've seen it happen many a time. All right, it happens at the abortion clinic, but it also happens at your local Planned Parenthood, could happen at your local doctor's office or your local hospital outpatient clinic. Again, we're looking at 4,392, almost 4,400 abortions done by pill versus 5,500 by surgery. The sad part is, for pro-lifers, is harder to pinpoint a young woman who's going in for a medical abortion. There's only, I believe it's 6 abortion clinics in Connecticut. So it's pretty obvious that most of the girls going in there are going in for an abortion procedure. But there's another couple dozen Planned Parenthoods and family planning clinics and pro-abortion physicians around the state where a young woman can, again, obtain an abortion that mostly takes place at home, right? And that is endangering her body, is certainly endangering the baby at home. And it's not as obvious, so it's harder to find these young women and to help them. So definitely to see that this is a growing trend, and this is something that's very concerning, because the young women do not always know the ramifications of this abortion, and they are not able to seek help. And many of them find themselves back in the hospital. Now, here's the issue. The doctor who prescribed that abortion pill may be in another state. There's something called telemetric abortions, in which let's say a Planned Parenthood doesn't have a physician on staff because it's just a counseling center, and they do referrals for abortion and pregnancy tests, but they don't do they're not abortion clinics. So they don't have a physician there. A physician will often do a teleconference, that is a Skype examination. I don't know about you, but I want my examination in person, and then determines that young woman is a candidate for a medical abortion. The physician that is viewing the patient by Skype will press a button in her office, and the drawer with the abortion drugs is electronically opened in the office where the young lady is. She's sitting there with a staff member who's not medically qualified. And that person will give her the abortion pill after a teleconference. And this is absolutely outrageous that this is allowed to happen. But every time the pro-life side tries to increase state requirements for physicians, for example, that a physician at an abortion clinic have admitting privileges at a hospital, there's hysteria on the other side. We're trying to have women die on emergency room floors. Well, it's obviously a smokescreen because it's very clear that nobody comes out of a pregnancy center bleeding and dying. We witnessed, our volunteers at St. George's witnessed a young woman carried out on a stretcher after a 911 call from the abortion clinic. Her head was covered. We don't know if she was even alive, but she was carried out on a stretcher, and the abortion clinic asked that the ambulance move its position from in front of the clinic where priests and nuns were praying the rosary to the back of the clinic where she could be less visible. I don't know if this was for the patient safety of the clinic's reputation, but there were several pictures taken by our volunteers. Meanwhile, we were able to obtain a copy of the 911 report where the nurse that called the 911 said that the girl was hemorrhaging, but that they were continuing with the abortion procedure. In other words, she may be bleeding out, but we're going to make sure that baby's dead. Because heaven forbid she gets to the hospital, the baby's still living, and the baby's life is saved in addition to the mother's. So that girl had to wait until they were sure they had finished the abortion before the ambulance was able to take her for life-saving treatment. We still don't know if she lived or died. We'll never know because of HIPAA laws. But we know that a woman was carried out on a stretcher to a hospital a block away where a physician who she'd probably never seen before had to evaluate a situation that he or she did not create. That doctor who did the damage was still in the abortion clinic and was not not going to follow her to the hospital because that doctor did not have admitting privileges in Hartford Hospital. We were asked to do an op-ed for the Hartford Courant, and I wanted to include this incident in my op-ed, and the Hartford Courant told me we will not publish this op-ed if it includes this incident in it, even though we had legal records showing that it had occurred. So it was published by the Independent Journal in Manchester because they were not ashamed of publishing the truth. The truth is that women are hurt by abortions, surgical abortions, and medical abortions, and they have lasting consequences of infertility and sometimes fatalities to the mothers. The days of back-alley abortions are not necessarily over. In October, the movie Gosnell is going to be appearing in limited release in theaters, and that is a terrible, terrible story, but unfortunately not a unique story of an abortionist who operated in full view of the law. That is, he had many inspectors by the Pennsylvania Health Department, but he managed to run a filthy, dangerous, discriminatory abortion business. And I say discriminatory, a black doctor had separate waiting rooms for black girls and for white girls. All right, there was a woman from, I believe from Bangladesh, who was hemorrhaging because his clinic was such a fire hazard. They were not able to get the stretcher and to get the woman out in time to save her, and she died. This doctor was dealing drugs. He was doing multiple prescriptions for opioids. In fact, that's how he was caught, because the terrible conditions in his abortion clinic where state inspectors had gone in and ignored blatant health violations, babies' bodies in refrigerators, cat feces and urine and hair everywhere, unwashed instruments being used, women being treated with painkillers by unqualified personnel, people that did not have a background in anesthesiology, no medical training, were just administering, life-threatening amounts of drugs. This incredible condition is not unusual. I'm told that it happens over and over again because the abortion industry is cozy with certain political parties, Democrats, They are overlooking, the health departments are overlooking gross violations in the outpatient facilities. And again, when pro-lifers try to move ahead with regulations, let's say that you have a LASIK surgery or some kind of outpatient surgery. There are very strict requirements, for, even for tanning salons, for cleanliness, for nail salons. But for abortion clinics, even though there may be requirements, they're certainly not enforced, and requirements are very, very low. So it's a very unsafe place to have an abortion. There is no safe place to have an abortion, but some of the clinics are absolutely, it's just really terrible, terrible statistics. So if you want to get help from your local pregnancy resource center, as I said, you call 800-395-HELP, and there will be a local pregnancy resource center of many different kinds. Some are secular, some are Catholic, some are Protestant, but nobody will discriminate against you for your religious background, your racial background, your ethnic background, your sexual preference. There is no discrimination. There is nothing but help and love. They will take you as you are, talk to you about your problems, let you cry, let you yell, and vent about all the injustice of your life. And believe me, I have seen terrible injustice. Some of these young women have never truly been loved. They haven't been loved by their parents, their siblings, and certainly not by their sexual partner. And the amount of abuse that they're able to take is just horrific. But it doesn't have to be her future just because it's her past. She can decide that although I was not loved, although I was used, although I was beaten, maybe even raped, I will not perpetuate this violence on my child. No matter what has been done to that mother, there is no justification of abusing that child. That child is completely innocent. Somebody put it this way: if we kill the child of a rapist, but we don't give the rapist the death penalty, how is that fair? What did the child of the rapist do? It reminds the mother of the rapist, surely. But many women who have been raped say that the abortion is like another rape. It's another violation of their person. It does not help. It just creates more harm. So it's important to know that no matter what the woman's situation, a crisis pregnancy center is the place to go. She'll receive impartial help. She'll receive non-judgmental love. No one's going to yell at her for her behavior. We're going to cry when she cries and be angry when she's angry and hold her hand through the days to come. I remember when I was pregnant with my first child, I was married. I had a job. I had medical care. I had a lot going for me. But my husband was in El Salvador and my doctor was in Nigeria, and I was having what they call Braxton Hicks. It was my first child, so I thought I was going into labor, so I was in a state of panic. The doctor I had to go and see was a stranger to me, and like I said, I was living in our apartment alone without my husband, going back and forth to school. And one day I was a little forgetful, as pregnant women often are, and I locked myself out of my apartment. So there I am outside on the street, trying to get in my house. I can't, cell phones in those days, but I couldn't call my husband's beeper in El Salvador, and I certainly couldn't talk to my doctor. So what did I do? I went home to Mama, but I also called the local pregnancy center. It was Life Center, as a matter of fact. And the woman on the phone there just listened and listened and listened and let me rant about my situation and was very supportive. I was not the kind of person that would receive physical help, but I certainly was the kind of person that could receive emotional help. In St. Gerard's, we had a mother that just needed that kind of emotional help. Again, she was married, she had good financial resources, but she felt alone. Sometimes when you live in a suburban neighborhood and you're a stay-at-home mom, you don't see anybody all day long. Your neighborhood is eerily silent, sometimes, most of the time, right? So this mother felt, she was an immigrant to the United States, she felt completely and utterly alone in her situation. She was involved in her church, but she needed connections. So through our center, we were able to rejoice with her about her coming baby. We were able to show her prenatal videos and give her a lovely layout when her child came, and give her a supportive community of other moms with whom she could bond as she's looking forward to the birth of her child. And she still comes to class and is very grateful for the time that we embraced her. I look forward to her being a volunteer with us one day. But it was wonderful that a woman who felt alone and isolated, even though abortion was not on her horizon, was still able to receive support. There's too little joy over children being born in this country. Yesterday I was at the beach getting lunch in a place that had ice cream, and in came this beautiful young couple with 4 children under the age of 4. One was in a baby carrier, and the other 3 were running around so joyful that they were getting ice cream. And the parents weren't harried. They were juggling the children very well, making them say thank you for their ice cream. And I just went over and I said to them, you have a beautiful family and you're doing an excellent job raising them, and they just look so surprised and so joyful that someone would come and say something positive. If you see a family like that, that often gets a raised eyebrows or a snide comment about, don't you know what causes that? Don't you have a TV? Just say something positive. Oh, what great kids you have. They're so well behaved. They're so joyful. They're just so full of life, even if they're little spitfires like some of mine were growing up. It's just beautiful to see parents raising children nowadays and not being part of the culture of death, of being open to life, having those 4 children under 4 and living a little bit of craziness, but a lot of beauty. It's just a wonderful countercultural thing to be in a pregnancy center where every baby that is coming is received with joy. And I hope that if you've heard this, that you're inspired to donate to your local pregnancy center. Do not let any baby clothes go to waste. If they're decent and they're not stained, pack them up in a bag and bring them to a pregnancy center. If you see some diapers on sale, pick them up. Pregnancy centers often need the larger diapers. It's amazing how quickly babies go into that size 5 and 6. They seem to never be in size 2 or 3 and go right to 5 and 6. So buy a case of diapers. Bring it to your pregnancy center and a case of wipes. Lots of wonderful diaper creams. Not powder, but wonderful creams are very welcome. And if you're a homebound person and you are crafty, maybe you can make a baby quilt. We have lovely homemade quilts. I can't tell you what that does to an expectant mother to have a handmade quilt or a handmade little baby outfit or cap or booties. Make those things. As many a homebound young older woman that is making these, some of them pray for the mothers as they're knitting or crocheting and include prayer cards. It's a wonderful gift. And of course your money and your prayers. I'm starting a pregnancy center named Pathways Pregnancy Center in Norwich, Connecticut, and in future shows I'll be giving you updates about our wonderful pregnancy center. Right now we're still applying for our non-for-profit and our incorporation. We have a beautiful Victorian home a block and a half from Planned Parenthood in Norwich. In a couple of weeks, UConn students, pro-life group, will be repainting our front porch. We've leased this building from a lovely Protestant lady who bought it with her inheritance because the Lord told her to buy a pregnancy center. Isn't that wonderful? What generosity. And she's owned this building for 17 years, only 6 of which there was a pregnancy center 10 years ago. And she was so overjoyed when we called her and said, we'd like to open a pregnancy center there. So Pathways Pregnancy Center will be opening in Norwich sometime this fall. I will obviously dedicate a show to it when it's getting closer and we have our dedication. But God is good, and all these pregnancy centers mostly run by volunteers and by donations. There is very little, maybe a little bit more government money now that we have a more pro-life president, but for many years there was absolutely no government money, all private donations and donations from churches and organizations like the Wonderful Knights of Columbus that have an ultrasound program. But this is a grassroots reaction, 2,300 pregnancy centers to offer to women who are abandoned by their men, abandoned by their mothers and their families, to offer them hope and to offer them a hand up and a hand out, sometimes unnecessary, but certainly to show the love of Christ to these women in the most dire circumstances. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week on the next Gospel of Life.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.